Cool. Great. Well, thank you all for having us. So we're going to be talking about scripting custom forms today, which is using external scripting languages to bring forms into DHIS2. I'm Ben Guaraldi. I'm the development team lead for DATIM, and that's the PEPFAR installation of DHIS2. If you're unfamiliar with PEPFAR, it's the United States of America's program to do AIDS interventions internationally. It was started under the Bush administration almost 20 years ago now. DATIM is sort of a branded installation of DHIS2, so as not to be confused with, say, the Ministry of Health installation in the various countries that PEPFAR is active. And then I will let Jim introduce himself if he can come off of mute.
I'm Jim Grace. I've been a DHIS2 core developer since 2013. And before that, worked in medical records for 5 years for PEPFAR in Kisumu, Kenya, through University of California, San Francisco. And before that, done a lot of other things.
And now Tim Harding.
Hello, good morning. I'm Timothy Harding. I'm a senior systems analyst for BAO Systems, and I've been working as an architect and metadata manager for DATIM since 2015. I've been working with ministries of health for a lot longer. So, hello and welcome.
So, yeah, okay. So the first thing we're going to talk about is default forms. So in DHIS2, it's possible to make a form. We're going to be talking about aggregate forms here because they've been sort of the most significant lift for PEPFAR. We do use tracker forms and event forms as well, but we haven't devoted as much time to their manufacture as we use less of them and collect less data from them. The default aggregate form. It brings all of the data elements in alphabetically, and then also applies the category option combos to them, and then just separates out all the fields. So just take a look at what that looks like. So we'll pick an organization unit. Global, right? And that's odd. Oh, they're not here now. Interesting. Okay. I'm prepared for that. Well, I'll just present and we can talk about what they look like. We've got a graphic of them right here. And as you can see, it breaks out the positive and the male here and displays them sort of separately. And I may attempt at a later point to actually bring the presentation in, that portion of the presentation in. So so that's how the default form works. And that is good if you've got sort of a simple set of data elements and a simple set of category option combos. If you've got something more complicated, you might want a section form. And a section form enables you to put sections in to the form. And so it gives you sort of horizontal tabs, but it still keeps the category combos separate. And the example for that is not present either, but you can sort of get a sense of it here. The horizontal tabs go up at the top, and then you can see that the less than 10 age is separated into female and male, and you enter each option in separately. So those didn't work for us. Because what we wanted was something a lot more complicated. And so we ended up going with a custom form, which is an option in DHIS2. You basically write your own HTML, and you can write JavaScript, and you can write all sorts of other pieces to it. You can write your own cascading style sheets. It's like designing a web page. You can make it exactly how you want it, but it's very difficult to maintain and keep in sync with the data elements and the category option combos that are loaded in your system. So let's take a look at the form that we put together. Where is this going to be? Let's look in here now. Hang on, let me just download the metadata. the form will be, the presentation will be here afterwards. So you can take a look at this. This is a previous version of the presentation at the moment, but we will put the new version up here soon. So let's look at this in raw. So I think you'd rather, oops, okay. Okay, so this is what our forms look like. And we put the year 2015 in so it wouldn't be confused with any present years. So as you can see, these numbers get automatically totaled in the JavaScript. Yeah, so let's just give an example of this, and then we'll talk through what the features are. So coming back to here. Okay, so what features do we have? So the main thing that we needed that was not available in the standard DHIS2 forms was an additional set of navigation. So the DHIS2 section forms come with horizontal tab navigations, but we needed a vertical navigation too along the side. Or actually, I guess the reverse. They come with a vertical navigation, and we needed a horizontal tab navigation. And you can see that here. These tabs are not available in the default form. And so we created them with our custom HTML. Auto calculation. So as you were seeing, as I was entering these numbers, it was using JavaScript to total them here. Mutual exclusion. So when certain numbers are entered, certain other numbers become unavailable. Let me find a good example of that here. I guess that isn't on this form. But it will cross out certain numbers when you enter other numbers in other portions of the form. I guess we don't have an example of that here. It also generates DHIS2 validation rules that get loaded into the system separately. So when you hit the run validation button, it will run those validation rules. And as we're looking at right now, it creates drafts in the static HTML. So those drafts can be sent to our program team to approve how the HTML looks. And so the form, when it's actually deployed to DHIS2, will look identical. So this is what we needed. We also had a complicated process. There were lots of changes coming fast and furious from our program staff that needed a lot of things to be changed as the process went on. And often the changes were frequent, like they would change the forms from quarter to quarter to quarter and from year to year to year. As you can see in that small version of our form, there are many entry fields, and our actual form is much larger than that, and there are more forms than that we have to maintain. There's lots of interactivity. The mutual exclusion and the auto summing happen as the data entry clerk enters the data. And then the requirements are very precise. Like things need to be exactly where they're supposed to be. They need to look a certain way. They need to have certain tabs and things like that. And then oftentimes there would be changes at the very last minute that would come to us and then we would have to be able to roll with. So while we developed these HTML forms originally just in static HTML, we didn't have a good way of handling the numerous changes, the frequent changes, the urgent changes, as well as the precise requirements and the back and forth with our program staff. All right, so here's where we got to the approach. So Jim is going to tell you a story of finding Tim in a hotel room.
Tim, do you want to start or shall I start?
I mean, this was, what is it, how many symposiums ago? And I was unable to attend. I was stuck in a hotel room working on MER and MER-related forms and metadata. And Jim felt sorry for me and decided to drop by.
So Tim was saying, no, I can't go to the presentations. We're in this conference, and I bought a pizza and brought it up to Tim's hotel room and said, what's going on? And he was showing me what he was trying to do with all this HTML. And I said, I bet we could script that so that we could come up with the fields you need in a spreadsheet, and we could write some software to generate these forms for you. You wouldn't have to be slaving over the HTML.
So that's how this software product that we're talking about today came to be. So again, our original approach was for Tim to do this all by hand, and then Jim came up with the idea of having a control file processed by a script. So the control file, as we call it, is just a simple spreadsheet. We use it in a CSV, although it could be anything. It could be an Excel file, it could be a Google Sheet. And that spreadsheet gives us, from that spreadsheet and HTML templates that we use for each individual data element. We take those two and a Python script processes them both. So looks through the control file to get instructions in the HTML templates to get the exact formatting to create assets to upload to DHIS2. And so all together, these three things, the control file, the HTML templates, and the Python script, are called Murteide. And Mur is a PEPFAR term. Well, I guess it's broader than that, but that's monitoring, evaluation, and reporting for those who are unfamiliar with that. Okay, so how does the control file look? So let's pull up a control file. Here we go. Sorry, I recently switched computers, so not everything is where I was expecting it to be. All right. Cool. And so again, the control file is normally in CSV, but we're going to look at an Excel one because it's a slightly better format. Let me make that a little bit more reasonable. Okay, so here's basically what we're looking at. So we come with a type, and then it sort of cascades down through these various objects. So there's a type, which is the form, and then it's got all sorts of information about the form. Then it goes to the vertical tab, or actually, rather, it goes to it can process multiple forms. So here are two different forms that are in this file. Then it can do vertical tabs, and then it goes through a variety of indicator names. And it's got a frequency for them, and we'll talk about that in a minute. And then it's also got these rules here. So that the form, the vertical tab, the indicator, and the sub-indicator. And then the HTML templates, which we could show you too, I guess. Let me go look at that. And this is what an HTML template does. And it pulls this in and replaces anything in these curly braces with the appropriate values by the Python file. And just so you've seen it, this is what what Murteide itself looks like. So it pulls in mutually exclusive rules, auto calculation rules, and then also the DHIS2 rules. The mutual exclusive rules appear in both the JavaScript and get loaded into DHIS2. The auto calculation rules are just in JavaScript. And then there are other kinds of rules, like greater than rules, that get loaded into DHIS2. And then also frequency locks. Now, when we were looking at the file, you notice that some of these things happen quarterly, annually, and semi-annually. So when we load the forms get loaded quarterly, but the semi-annually and annually are locked by JavaScript. Which means that, theoretically, if you knew how to do it, you could enter data into those, but you would have to use something other than the form because the form has them locked. Okay, so what files are generated? So actually, let's do a quick run of this too. So this is what it looks like as it's running. So we tell it which CSV we're using, we tell it which DSAG files we're using, and then it gives some output, like these warnings here, and then it creates a form. And then if we open the output directory, you'll see the files that it just generated. All of those are 10:16 a.m., which is what time it is here on the East Coast of the United States. So let's walk through what these forms are. So there's a file to import the forms into DHIS2. That's datasets.xml. There's 3 files to import validation rules to DHIS2. We could put them all in one file, but we separate them out in case you want to just load the new ones, or just load the modified ones, or load all of them. And then it creates static HTML versions of the forms. And so we can see that right here, which can just load in your browser. And it's just one file. It's got all of the image assets and things like that pulled into it. And then it looks better if you do it here. So there's the vertical tab and the horizontal tab. And then it has a bunch of other files that probably only make sense for data that I'm not going to go into. And it also creates a log file. Okay, so we've given this presentation several times. We've given it at the symposium back in 2018, and we also gave it at the annual conference back in 2018. And we've talked to some of you who are on this call about this code. And we've open sourced the code in Murteide. That repository that I was looking at to download the code for this presentation is freely accessible, and the link will be at the end of this presentation. But so far we haven't found a second use case like anybody else to use this code. It is possible that that's just the way that it should be, that this approach only makes sense for PEPFAR and doesn't make sense for anyone else. But it's possible that it makes sense for other folks as well. It just needs an adaptation of the Murteide code itself. So we wanted to put together just a little survey to determine how folks might use this code. And so we put together a Mentimeter presentation for this. So let me see if I can do this. So if you could go to menti.com and punch in the code 7301225. Cool. And then start answering the "what country do you work in" question. Okay, we got somebody from Yemen. Burkina Faso, Kenya, cool. Uganda. Great. Trying to log in myself on my phone so I can see where I am. Great. If anybody hasn't had a chance to reply, could you raise your hand using the hand raising feature? Once more time. Okay, we'll just give a few more seconds. All right, so people are still answering. I guess I'll give it a couple more seconds. And Tim is looking at how to activate those forms so that we can see them a little bit later in the presentation. I forgot that there's a SQL script that unassigns forms that are not automatically assigned running on that server. So that is what happened there, I'm pretty sure.
Which ones are you looking for?
They all start with Murteide. So there's Murteide section form, or actually, I guess it's one period Murteide section form. And you probably have to assign them using the SQL, just assign them to global.
Sure. What server? This is test?
Oh, it's on Ben.
Ben.
I hope you have SSH to that. Good luck.
I can assign them manually.
I tried that and it didn't work.
Okay.
But you feel free to try it again. It might be that I'm using an older version of Chrome. Okay, and Brian is in Brian. Great. Okay, so we're going to go to the next slide. Okay, so what kind of organization do you work for? I put some options, NGO, non-governmental organization, for-profit, government, military, other. If you don't want to tell us, that's fine. Yeah, and don't forget to hit the submit button. Your option won't appear until you do that. Wow, a lot of NGOs. Nobody's in it for the money, I guess. Well, that's probably good.
Hey, Ben, they are assigned.
Great, thank you. Could you kill the data set assignments cron job too, just so they don't get unassigned during the presentation?
Sure.
Thanks. All right, do folks need more time? We got 50 participants and 15 answers, so I'm guessing yes. Maybe I'll wait until we get to 20. Oh, and I probably should have warned you about this already. This presentation is being recorded. You probably know that already. So if for some reason it is awkward for you to admit to working for an NGO, not that these are identifiable in any way, feel free to skip a question and go to the next one. All right, cool. We'll go to the next slide. Okay, so how many people work for your organization? And because of the way Mentimeter is set up, you have to enter the number twice. So yeah, and you can define organization however makes sense for you. And if you don't enter the number twice, it's okay. It'll just look a little weird like that one on the right. Okay, great. So we're mostly in the range of sort of small to 500-ish with a bunch of folks at the very large organization range. All right. Okay, so now let's get into forms. How many forms does your organization have or want to have in DHIS2? Okay, some large numbers there.
Where's the greater than 100?
Oh, well, greater than 100 is also greater than 20, so
Well,
it's greater than 20.
we could have added some more.
Yeah, I didn't want to. I honestly thought there would be a few zeros and ones. Oh, well, I'm glad that there aren't any zeros and ones, because if there were, you all would probably be in the wrong presentation. And as I say that, somebody logs a 0 and 1. No, okay. Great, okay. So that gives us some sense. Oh, people are still answering. I'll give folks another second. Cool. All right. So how many forms have you personally been involved in creating? Wow. Okay. Folks have done a lot of forms. Gotta give another second for this one. I mean, most of us, and some of us have done very few, which is totally cool too. Great. Okay. Okay, so, and you can select multiple of these. Does your organization use aggregate, tracker, or event forms? So pick whichever ones you use. I think, and just to be clear, the aggregate forms are in the data entry app in DHIS2. The tracker ones are in tracker capture, at least until 2.3.3. I think it's supposed to move to capture at some point, but I think it hasn't. And the event forms are in capture around 2.3.3, and before that we're in event capture. And then if you use Android tracker, those forms would be tracker forms. I guess I probably should have put a separate category for that. All right. Cool. So folks are using the aggregate forms a lot, but the event forms and the tracker forms too. All right, great. Okay, so how often does your organization make or revise forms? So make new forms or revise forms, because the process of revising a form, it can be almost as complicated as the process of making a new form. I envy that person who just put just once and never revised. All right, so quarterly and annually are the main ones. Fortunately, nobody has to deal with more than monthly. Give folks another second on this one. All right, cool. I've been told my mic is a little quiet, so I will try to speak up. Right, moving on to the next one. Okay, what programming languages would be most likely to be used in your organization for scripting forms or other tasks? It's fine if you don't know. You can answer multiple answers. The answers are not case sensitive, so just write whatever might be used.
It's a duel between Python and R.
Yeah, it does seem to be. Oh no, look at that. Cool, some JavaScript kicking in there. I don't think I know Tabulia.
Tableau.
Oh, Tableau. Sorry, I couldn't read that. It's the font. It makes things harder to read. Cool, so lots of JavaScript. And of course, in the forms themselves, you would need to use JavaScript to do any of the complicated interactivity. But then creating the forms could be done in a variety of languages, and JavaScript is a great option for that. And also the forms would need HTML in order to sort of position the objects, etc. I don't know how you would use HTML to sort of duplicate something like what Murteide does, but it could be possible. Probably you'd be using JavaScript in that case too. Cool, great. Okay, what features would your organization need in forms? So some possible features might be horizontal tabs, like come by default in DHIS2, vertical tabs like we put in our forms, auto calculation, automatic creation of validation rules, drafts and static HTML. And I mean, basically, I have no idea what other folks would want. And it's got 3 options. Feel free to put in more than 3. It's just you'll have to submit and then reload. Tabs, yeah. While we do this, I'm gonna up my mic volume. Is that too loud? I'll assume not.
I would lower it another pip.
Okay. Is that better?
Yeah.
Okay. We especially want to know if there are features that PEPFAR did not need, but that you need. Oh, responsive HTML, that's a good one. That's not something we have to think about for PEPFAR, because as far as we know, pretty much people are filtered by municipality, okay? As far as we know, people are in filtering of options, okay? As far as we know, sorry, I keep not finishing that sentence. As far as we know, people are doing this only on desktops, the PEPFAR forms. Or as far as we hope, I guess, probably. Right. Whoever wrote API for default form HTML, I'm going to put you on the spot. Feel free to just ignore this request. But if you could tell us what you meant by that, I'd be very interested. You could do it either in the chat or in the community of practice about this session. The Zoom chat, whichever is easiest for you.
There is an API for grabbing the default form HTML. It's not.
Yeah, it's not.
One because it's embedded.
It's not clear to me that that's what they mean, though.
Yeah.
The desire to use that API. So I'm just curious. Maybe Tim's right. And if we could talk about that later too. Okay. Great. Let's go to the next one. Okay, so those are the features that are essential. Is there anything additional that would be nice to have? And same examples apply here. Maybe everything is essential and nothing is nice to have. So that's definitely the situation we have in with PEPFAR forms. So. All right, I'm not seeing any answers. Should I move on? Seems like it. Cool. Okay, so what are the pain points involved in making a form? If you've attempted to make a form, or if you've heard about folks making a form in your organization, what has gone wrong? What's been difficult? Mm-hmm. Yeah. No pain points. That's awesome. Go you. Logic addition and double entries.
Probably
Interesting.
skip logic.
What's that?
That's probably skip logic,
Mm-hmm.
which is doable in events and tracker with
Got it. I was assuming it was like adding things like the auto calculation and the mutual exclusion. Maintaining the forms, that is a good thing to be thinking about, and definitely a pain point. Document ready doesn't work. Yep, that's a thing.
Is that a JavaScript joke?
It's not exactly a joke. So you have to use the custom DHIS2 events to make things happen in the forms. And so if you try to use something like document ready, which is, I think that's a standard jQuery function, but it's definitely used frequently in JavaScript. It might be a standard JavaScript function, I forget. It doesn't work because the form is already using the document ready. The DHIS2 code is, so you can't use it. You have to use their code, which, as you may know, sometimes doesn't fire under certain circumstances. Cool. All right, I think we should give this one another minute or two. We're running pretty far ahead of schedule, so. Think of all of your pain, share it with us. Frequent data element changes. As in the forms need to plug into different data elements? Is that what that one is?
It's probably just changes in general.
Got it. All right. Okay, last call. Okay, cool. Okay, so what resources are available in your organization for form creation? So some possibilities are visual design, user interface design, computer programming, maybe none, maybe money, like, I don't know. And there's no wrong answer to this question. And as far as I know, Mentimeter can't tell who you are from your various questions. So you're probably safe, but I wouldn't write, something specific about your organization. Wow, none. Okay. All right, we'll go with the none then. Oh, we got some computer programmers. Okay. Tools like Tableau. Cool. A computer. I'm sorry, I'm laughing at some half filled out wiki. That's pretty funny.
I like whoever wrote me. We've all been.
Well, not all of us have been there, but Tim definitely has. Oh, explain the question, please. So we're just trying to sort of evaluate what folks are trying to do with the forms and then what folks have as an ability to do that thing. So one of the obstacles I think that has come in terms of people using Murteide for their own purposes is, just resources. Like if there are no developers in your organization, computer programmers in your organization, then it's going to be hard to adapt this computer program for your use. And it doesn't, as those of you who have looked at the code know, it doesn't work out of the box. you definitely will need to make changes that work for you. Some of the changes are feature based, like maybe you don't need like the variety of datum specific files. Maybe you don't need vertical tabs, but maybe, and then some of it is just like getting it to work with your DHIS2 environment and things like that. So does that, I hope that helps explain the question.
Learning deployment procedures, learning the ins and outs of deploying to, potentially 6 different revisions of DHIS2.
Yeah, and so that's another point about Murteide. Murteide creates the deployment artifacts, but then you have to actually deploy them to the server, which could be as simple as like loading them in the input-output, the import-export app in DHIS2, but it could be more complicated than that, depending on your installation. Cool, all right. Okay, so if your organization has solicited outside assistance for forms, who have you hired? What have they done? If you haven't, what are the obstacles? We've heard money and security are obstacles before. I'm sure there are others. Money being like there's no money to hire people. Security being like we can't tell people what's in our forms because of security clearances. I'm sure there are others. And I just want to say, I'm pretty sure this is true of you, Tim, and I'm really sure this is true of me, and I'm pretty sure Jim as well. We're not available to hire. We're too busy with our work with PEPFAR, but it's possible that other people are under certain circumstances. First, I thought BAO was the obstacle, but yeah, cool. Lack of the experts.
This one might be a little bit hard to parse because we have both positive and a negative
Yeah,
question.
I think I'm seeing where people are going with it, though.
Yeah.
Are folks having difficulty answering the question? So you can write something in the forum and we can explain further.
We have a couple of people talking about maintenance afterwards. Yeah, that one's definitely an issue that I've seen before too, where
Yeah.
an outside contractor creates a form, but then the local staff at the NGO are not trained in maintenance.
Cool. All right. So I think there might be one more. Yeah, okay. So just trying to figure out what are the important factors in form creation for your organization. And so I put some down: ease of entering the data for the data entry folks once the form is created, ease of creating the form, ease of revising the form, ability to create the form without programming, complexity of the form if your forms are very complex, and then maintaining data quality, so which can often be in tension with ease of creating the form and ease of entering data.
So data quality can take on a couple of different forms here. We're thinking some of the JavaScript-based restrictions we have in place for timing, JavaScript-based restrictions we have in place for picking specific disaggregations. It could be validation rules that are embedded in DHIS2. It could be validation rules that are embedded into the form. It could be dual data entry. It could be min and max values. So
Give people another couple moments to fill out this one.
thanks, Martin. I'll speak up.
Right. So you should, now we're at the end of the Mentimeter. Oh, so not actually at the end. You should be able to code to the end, and then it will allow you to download results. So, yeah. Okay. So here we are. So actually, let's just jump back to here. Let's see if we can load those forms that I was going to show at the very beginning. Cool, great. So here's the default form. And as you can see, it's putting in a bunch of different indicators, and the different category option is just sort of listing them like so. So that's the default form. And then a section form gives you these horizontal tabs, but as you can see, is still just listing each disaggregate. And that certainly works under some circumstances, especially for smaller forms or simpler forms.
Definitely.
But then if you want to look at a simpler version of our Murteide form, does this one do this yet? Okay, here we go. And this, now you can see the mutually exclusive stuff too, which I guess wasn't working in that HTML version of the form. So when you enter something in this 30 to 49, it blocks out 30 to 49 here. If you clear this, it opens them up again. And then, that relates to the data quality that we were talking about there. And then the vertical tabs as well. Okay, so I guess my next question is anybody game to talk about their organization's form needs? Again, this is being recorded, so keep that in mind if that's going to be problematic. But is anybody willing to do that? And I'll sort of go through here. I guess raise your hand if you'd like to be unmuted. Maybe you can unmute yourself. Unclear to me. Does anybody want to talk about their organization's form needs? It would be helpful to us.
Just so you know, the participants cannot unmute themselves, so they have
Can,
to raise their hand.
yeah, and if they raise their hand, then do we unmute them? Is that
Yeah, I can unmute the participant.
great? Thank you. Okay, we're not seeing anybody raise their hand. If you want to, if you
Oh,
know how to.
I see one.
Oh, okay, yeah. Please unmute
Yeah.
them then.
Yes, good afternoon and good evening for the colleagues. My name is Arafat. I'm working for WHO Yemen in Sana'a. We have a very high demand for an information system that would be like a repository for everything. We have a very complex emergency in Yemen. So we have a lot of outbreaks. We have a lot of projects that are being supported by different partners as well. So we are working currently to collect data for health cluster support for the health facilities, and also from the health facilities supported by WHO and World Bank. So we are collecting directly the data directly from the health facilities, and also through the partners as well. So we have over 3,000 health facilities with the partners, and for WHO we have almost 200 plus hospitals which are directly sending using the Capture app. So the future, it has a lot of complexity, because we need a lot of programs to be integrated. Like we have the surveillance system to be integrated, as they are using a custom app, which is having a lot of difficulties in terms of quality and checking. However, they are interested in having workflow. So the data will be sent from one level to another and will be validated by the different levels. So this was a challenge for us as well. We have also, for example, we will be implementing for the nutrition. We have implemented the pilot for the nutrition surveillance. However, we have a lot of severe or acute malnutrition children. So we need to implement the tracker for those children, and to see how the referral, because the SAM cases need to be, when they are treated, they go to be like MAM. So we need to build that link to have an integrated system for all, the NGOs working in there. So we have WFP, UNICEF, and WHO. So WFP in charge of the supplies and things like that. And the UNICEF is working on the moderate acute malnutrition, and WHO is working on the severe acute malnutrition. And this will be under the umbrella of the Ministry of Health. But this is to be implemented in the future. I think this will be a very good tool. There is a very high demand for the supplies, for example, by WFP, where they want to have like an alert of SMS when the stock has decreased below the minimum level. We have also other use cases that will be implemented, but the issue as
I'm going to pause you for just a second.
Yeah.
So this is great to know about the context that the forms are in, and a lot of the things you're talking about can be done with DHIS2. But like, what do the forms themselves look like?
So for
their event forms. I got that.
Yeah,
I think I missed anything else though.
Yes, so we have an aggregate form and we have event form. For the aggregate, it's more complex. People need to better understand, and we have to advocate more on the use of data rather than the data collection itself.
So with the aggregate form, does it have like, I don't know, how many data elements? Oh, go ahead, yeah.
255 elements.
Data elements, and then
yes.
Are all those disaggregated as well?
No, this is including the disaggregation.
Including the disaggregations, cool. And then do you put them all on one form or do you tab them?
Yeah, it's in tabs. It is well organized. It is and it is used to capture data from the field. So people in the with the mobile with the new capture app, I think it's a revolution, I would say.
So I'm a little unfamiliar with the Android sort of interfaces to DHIS, just because we don't deal with that over at PEPFAR. Does the new Android capture app do aggregate data capture?
Yes, the
Oh, okay.
previous one it was not, but the new update, I think it was updated like 4 or 5 months ago.
Uh-huh.
It was excellent.
And I suppose that it has difficulty dealing with custom forms, I would think.
Yes. So we are
Well,
not using custom form. That's what
yeah.
one of my questions. Yes.
Yeah, so certainly if in your use case, like using something like Murteide would have to mean that you could use custom forms in general, which would sort of pull you away from the capture app, which sounds like it's working for you. So then maybe you would actually want something like Murteide that was just creating regular section forms to be deployed, and that could make sense under certain circumstances, and it could put together the validation rules and things like that. Yeah, I could see that. That makes sense.
And some of the issues that we are facing in Yemen, so we don't have a big technical support here.
Right.
So what we have, for example, in two instances, my analytics has stopped, and we are struggling with that. So we created visualizations outside of DHIS, and
Right.
we use direct query to the data values, which is I think it's making a lot of resources being used, and I think it should not be the case.
Yeah. Makes sense. Cool. All right. Great. That was really helpful.
Thank you for the chance. Yeah. Thank you.
Does anybody else want to follow his lead? If there are any other hands up, you can invite them to speak. Cool. Great. Last call. Tim and Jim, I think that you've been looking at the questions in the chat and in the community practice. Does one of you want to mention one of those questions now? We can talk about that.
I haven't seen any questions in the community of practice, unless I'm missing something. Tim, have you seen anything in the chat?
Tim, is this one from you in somewhere? How does Murteide deal with the changing forms?
Yeah, I can answer that if
that'd be great. Yeah, that'd be great.
So if you want to open up one of the control files.
Yes.
So this has been a more recent addition to Murteide since the first couple of times we've presented this.
This is an older control file. Is that going to work?
That is probably fine. So one of the things that are that happens with PEPFAR, as anybody who has worked with PEPFAR knows, is that the metadata changes quite often. And so we are currently working on MER 2.5, which is the next set of changes that will be released in January. The guidance for that should be out in October if anybody wanted to know that. So one of the things that happens is that we change our disaggregates. They started adding what are known as the 5-year age groups. So we went from having 25 to 49 to having 25 to 29 and 30 to 34. So rather than start making updates to creating new data elements, because we're at a little bit over 2,000 now for MER, we just started reusing our old ones. They added a feature to DHIS2 that allows us to have multiple category combos per data element. But as you can guess, that sounds like a mess to keep track of. So if we scroll over to the right, in this form, say to one of the DE column headers, there we go. You'll see that we have our different data elements that are going to appear for each of our different disaggregates, and up to 3 per disaggregate file, because we have some more complex type indicative questions. So what's interesting here is that we can also override the category combo. That would be column O, column Q, column S, all the way over. And if we don't override it, but we should, Murteide will actually contact the server and say, hey, does the category option combo match with the category combo that you've selected? And if it doesn't,
right,
we'll throw an error. Yep. And so that helps us keep track, especially when we write new HTML files, which would be column I. Especially when we write new HTML files, is making sure that those line up with the category combos that we've assigned our data elements. Not only will it check this file, but it will also check what's assigned on the server itself. So that helps us keep our category combos in sync with our HTML files, especially because we're updating them all the time.
So let's go look at the next steps. So I guess like where we would go from here, if your organization has a software developer that would like to work on scripting forms, like to adapt portions of Murteide, anything like that, let us know. This is our contact information. It'll obviously be in the recording of the presentation, and then it'll be in the slides, which are on that GitHub repo. We also want to.
We had a question about the GitHub repo.
Let me do this first. We want to thank Kyle Pittleman and Greg Wilson, who work pretty closely with us. Greg wrote most of the JavaScript that's in these forms, and Kyle Pittleman has done lots of changes to the HTML and CSV and Python, sort of taking over Tim's work in maintaining the forms. So yeah, okay. Yes, let's talk. Here are these. Is that visible with this?
That should answer the question about where the GitHub repo is.
Yep. We can, I can paste this link in the chat. Maybe I can, let's see. Go here.
Hey, Ben, I have a question for you.
Yes.
Do you know of anything that PEPFAR would like to add to Murteide in the future?
I try not to think about it. In the slides, an old version of the slides is available here, and we'll update with this version soon. And then all of our contact here. I don't know, Tim, do you?
Well, I know we had discussed many times before starting to integrate the validation rules into the JavaScript.
We have talked about that, yep. And so what that would look like is, so we have integrated the mutually exclusive validation rules into the JavaScript, but we could also flag people when they violate other validation rules, like the greater than validation rule and things like that. So we haven't done that yet. It's a bit of a lift, and we had to figure out exactly what that would look like. But it's definitely a possibility for the future.
I have a question, if I may ask it of Tim. Ben, if you could go back to the control file and scroll back over to column 1, you'll see column A. You'll see some instructions, and this may have something to do with the fact that I used to program in assembly language way back when. But in that hotel room, when Tim and I first started working on this idea, we sat down and started designing what would be a spreadsheet, what do we need to capture, how do we represent all the varieties of things that we need to put in a form. And over the days and months and years since we started, this format has expanded. But Tim, I wonder if you could just give a brief introduction to what are those things in column A, and what do they mean, and what do they tell Murteide to do as far as generating forms. This is only one way of representing what a form looks like. There are many, many, many possibilities, but this is what we did.
So for version 1, if you look, column A through column F were just column A and B. So the whole tree was then squished down to just 2 columns. And so you had to have a very keen eye to tell the difference between a form and a V-tab and an indicator and a sub-indicator. So for version 2, we kind of spread it out into this tree-like structure so that it was a lot easier to find, form number 2 inside a control file. So, but what do those things in column A actually mean? So every time you see a form, that's when Murteide knows to create a new data set. And way over on the right is all the data sets information. I hide it over on the right because we don't really need it on the left because it barely comes up. I believe that Murteide is capable of having these things out of order, but I wouldn't try it. And then right below form, we have our very first vertical tab. And so that's our V tab. So here it's prevention, one of the major arms of PEPFAR. And below the vertical tab, then we list our
I'm just going to swap back to here for just a second so that folks can see this. So here's the form, and here are the V tabs.
Yep.
See, V tabs.
And then right below there, we have our indicators. And our indicators are those major groupings or major questions that we're asking the field to report on, such as VMC circ, or key pops preventative, or gender-based violence.
And then you see those here.
And so we find that we have a lot of partners that work in only one indicator or just a subset of indicators. So logically grouping them that way so that the partner can just say, this is the only one I need to report on. Let me close all the rest is helpful. Then below the indicators, we have the different disaggregations that we ask the user for or the partner for. And so those are what we
before you go on. And then as you can see, this one's quarterly, so it's always unlocked. Yep. But these are semi-annually and annually. And so they're locked for this quarter, but maybe are unlocked for this quarter. Let's see.
So yes, because we are asking questions that have a different cadence than the data set is set for, the data set is set to be quarterly, but some of our indicators are only reported semi-annually and annually. So most of the time, if we got data in for the wrong quarter, it was user error. It wasn't anything malicious. So what we did to mitigate that was to create a JavaScript lock that just hides those when you're selecting the wrong quarter. So KPPrev will only show up in quarters 2 and 4, and GenGBV will only show up in quarter 4.
And you can expand it, but then you can't enter anything.
Yep. A lot of people like to see the forms, even if they're not allowed to enter data into them, so they know what they should be collecting. Some people prefer to both read the guidance and look at the forms. So below each of our indicators, we have what are known as sub-indicators. Sub-indicators are just the different ways that you ask the question. So how many people did you circumcise? Okay, tell me that answer again, but tell me how many tested positive for HIV when you brought them in. How many were known HIV positive? How many were known HIV negative? How many were newly HIV negative? And so you can see over on the right that we have our text right here that just asks the user, hey, can you report this number in a couple of different ways? To prevent double counting, however, we only use one of them as our numerator. And so DATIM and all of our downstream applications that we use for presenting the results, we know that only one of these is going to be the numerator. The easy way for us to know inside here is, I believe, through column I or the column right before I.
I thought it was L. Oh,
leave it
no.
as H. So column H will tell us what that numerator is. And so,
No, H is the rules.
yep,
Oh, does it tell you through here? Okay, cool.
yep. And so it'll tell you that this row should equal another row. And so if we have any sort of auto calculates, this is how we send the data around inside of Murteide. We say, here's our unique ID for this indicator, that's column F. And then in column H, we say, pull that data from column F and put it in here. So that's
and F is just used within Murteide. It doesn't make it to DHIS2 at all, but it's the way that we refer to each thing in these rules. So R is the row that we're on, and any other unique indicators are from here. So you can see VMMC circ numerator in both places.
Mm-hmm. And so this one's a unique one that it doesn't have an auto-calculate top row, but there is one for KP-Prev.
Right.
And so KP-Prev's auto numerator is pulling from there. So yeah, those are what those 4 commands are in column A, and then we've just spread it out in a tree-like structure so that it's easy for us to quickly scroll through the control files and find what we're looking for.
All right. If nobody else wants to talk about their form needs and there aren't any other questions, I guess we could end 15 minutes early. If anybody wants to post a question in the chat or raise your hand to talk about your form, you're more than welcome. Great. Well, thank you so much for coming. Feel free to ask us questions on the community of practice. We're happy to answer them. And have a great rest of your day.